Okay, some more roster moves to talk about. I've mostly been talking about the NAL roster moves, and we will see the Mirage announcement in this video, but I also wanted to talk about a little bit of EUL in specific, I think is the main other thing I cover in this video, and maybe a couple other things. So let's just go through a few, well, things. All right, Team Empire, as probably a lot of you may well know, they sort of dumped most of their roster. They retained Scyther and then picked up 4 different Russian players coming from Hellraisers or Vertice Pro. And super controversial move, perhaps the most controversial move in the history of Siege roster moves. So they got rid of Always, Joystick, Dan, and Shepard, 4/5 of the runners-up at the most recent SI just last month. So, I mean, yeah, it's like a terrible decision, right? And probably the 4 quote-unquote better players, Scyther generally being the most underperforming player on the roster. Not to say that he's bad and not to say that he wasn't an important part of the roster, but probably the most replaceable. And so why did it happen? My understanding is that it had to do with inner turmoil. They wanted to get rid of Scyther, and Razor GM, the org or something, wanted to bring him back on. He was their coach in the future, and then they brought on Jekka, and then Jekka, I don't know, got the boot for one reason or another. They wanted to bring back Razor GM, and the other players did not want to play with him. So I think they offered an ultimatum, or maybe they already intended to leave. They had another offer, but that fell through, whatever it was. I don't think we yet know all of the details, but it seems that those 4 players will not be playing in EUL for Stage 1, and I don't see how they could play in EUL at all in the 2022 season with the way that the league works. There would have to be some major changes. And then there's also some sort of 2/5 rule where going into each stage, my understanding is that you need to have at least 2 players that qualified for the league, but there's also weird stuff with franchising that can maybe supersede that, and maybe Ubisoft would make an exception because of what happened to these guys. I don't know. The EUL, the league as a whole, is still unsure when it's going to be starting, when it's going to be running, what the deal is going to be. If you watch the previous video, they announced the dates for the other leagues, but not EUL. So, I mean, that really sucks for these guys, and it's just really unfortunate for anyone that was a fan of them, and, you know, especially them. That's just really tough, and I don't know, again, if it was just something they couldn't control at all, or they gave an ultimatum and they lost out. It's weird that the org, if given the choice, chose just Scyther and Razor over the other 4 players. But I mean, here we are now. Empire was my favorite Russian team, and well, I guess won't really be anymore because it's not the same team. There was talk of them going to Gambit, and I guess that didn't happen. So they were officially released, and I think that's the next tab I have on here. Right, they were released by the org, and in the past, I want to say it was like Vitality held onto a couple of their players after they benched them from the roster, but they didn't release them, so they couldn't actually go anywhere else without a buyout. And I mean, orgs are hesitant to buy out players unless it's for a very good reason. They don't want to pay however much extra money. So, right, they became free agents, but this is after the transfer window closed, so there was really no chance of them going to any other org playing in the league. They can play in Challenger League, and which isn't really that much of a consolation. It's a massive difference between T1 and T2, and I suppose T2 in Europe is more impressive than it is in some of the other regions, particularly NA, but still it's no EUL. So yeah, we'll see what happens with these guys. I imagine we won't hear anything substantial on their fates within T1 for a while, and if we do, it probably won't be good news. It'll probably be them announcing that they're disbanding, that some number of them are retiring, whatever it is. So I guess, you know, keep a lookout for that. But maybe we'll see them back in 2023, and maybe somehow we'll see them back before that time. And I think that pretty much does it for these guys. Let's move on to the next thing. All right, so I talked about this in the previous video a little bit. I alluded to it, and somebody commented. They were asking about the ban process, the pick process, whatever you want to call it, for best of 3s. And so this is Hawks on Twitter here. He pulled this from the new rulebook, I believe. So this has the pick and ban system for best of 3s, which we won't see for a little while. I suppose all of the regional leagues are playing best of 1s, right? But once we go to the LATAM playoffs, the APAC playoffs, I believe they're playing best of 3s, right? Maybe even a best of 5 for the finals. I don't know if they've restructured it, what the deal is in particular, but at least then, and if not then I suppose this will be the structure for most of the games played at the upcoming major. So best of 3 map veto process, right? Team A bans, Team B bans, and then Team A picks, Team B picks side on that map, and then Team A picks the side for overtime on that map, and then Team B does the same thing with their map, and then A and B, and then ban, 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 and then the last map is the decider map. So if you're not fully aware, there are going to be 9 maps in the new pool. They took out Coastline and added 3 other maps, bringing the total up to 9. So this is similar to the process before, where each team gets a ban and then each team gets a pick, but now there are 9 maps. So you get 1 ban, and then of course your opponent also bans, but by the time that you make your ban, there are, and of course, technically it's 7 maps if you ban second, but just say you're Team A, you ban whatever map, there are now 8 maps remaining. Your opponent gets to ban a map, and then you get to pick a map. So you might have to play any of 8 different maps. You can have 1 permaban, but you might well have to play any of 8 maps before, and it's the same as before. You could still have a permaban, but now there are 6 maps. Before there were 6 maps, and now there are 8 maps. So I mean, 2 whole new maps that you need to be proficient on. This is really going to be detrimental for teams that do not have wide map pools, that would rely on a permaban and then maybe lean into their opponent's permaban, whatever it was. So you really need to have an expansive map pool. So this will benefit teams, players, whatever, that are good on many maps. And I think especially will benefit teams that have really good support staff, because of course your players are the ones that need to get good on the maps, but the support staff can really do research on how you should play the map, how your opponents are going to play the map, how you counter that, all of these things, so they can get you up to snuff much more quickly. So that might be more important than ever. And so then you're gonna, that'll be the 2 maps banned, 2 maps picked, and then you'll just do all the bans and then the decider. So it shouldn't too much affect the decider in theory, because it's still just gonna be the last ban. Each team has a lot of control over what it is, but again, for the first set of picks, it's going to be big if one of the teams really wants to play one of the new maps. If it's a particular one, of course, the other team can still ban that specific map. But if they just want to play a new map, thinking that their opponents aren't going to be good on any of the new maps, then their opponents get to ban one. I mean, say they ban Border, but then they can still pick Theme Park, or they can still pick Skyscraper. So teams are very quickly going to have to get decent on these maps, or they are going to maybe lose some games that they weren't going to lose otherwise. I was going to say that they didn't deserve to lose, but yeah, I mean, if you don't get good on a map, then probably you did deserve to lose on it. And okay, moving on to the next thing. So Jess announced that she will not be doing the Siege broadcast anymore. So EUL and APAC North is what she did before. And then Twit Longer here, I'll go over that. I don't really want to read through the whole thing. It's kind of lengthy. So, I mean, I'll leave it here for a second. Feel free to pause it and read it. She basically just talks about how she doesn't feel it's worth it anymore because it comes at a great personal cost being away from her partner and all of this stuff. And she has other things she wants to focus on, other opportunities that she has announced, will announce, streaming, I think still working Valorant, all these other things. But it's a pretty big loss, especially for EUL, but just Siege as a whole. Probably one of the better analysts the game has ever had. Maybe the best. I mean, who's to really say? But, you know, that stuff. And we'll have to see who is replacing her, what they're going to be doing. Maybe Fresh will stick around. Maybe they'll put somebody else on the analyst desk. Maybe it'll just be him. I don't know, but okay. Just thought I'd throw that in there. Next up, okay, here is the completion of the North American League. So unless we get anything crazy after this, unless we see a surprise announcement from, I suppose, any of the teams, but especially any of the teams that we didn't think were going to make a change, being Sonic, Dark Zero, TSM, and Space Station, then it seems like we have our 50 players for the NAL, and I guess 51 if you're counting Blaz, but you know, he won't be playing in stage 1 as far as we understand. Okay, so Marmalade, Benji, Thomas, Razor, and Melted, with Guerra and DNA on the support staff. So I mean, here's a little picture down here. We got Thomas, Benji, Marmalade, Melted, and Razor. So you know, I hate to say it, I'm looking forward to see how these guys play, but it seems like the weakest roster going into it, and it's not completely easy to say that. It could be Beast Coast the weakest. It could be the XSET could be the weakest, just because we haven't seen them play as a team at all. And they have a lot of new players. And this team also has a lot of new players, right? It's only Thomas and Benji sticking around from before. Melted qualified for Pro League on Parabellum, moved over to Mirage here. Razor was playing on XSET, and Marmalade getting the call up from Challenger League. So we'll see what these guys can do. I'm going to do like some sort of semi-official power rankings. Well, not official, just my opinions on the power rankings later on, and maybe some players to watch out for, what to look for on each team. I guess I'll mention Marmalade is only what, like maybe I'm pulling this number out of my ass. So like the third female to play in T1. I think Goddess played for a while on like Cloud9, and maybe when that org was another roster, I think it was pretty much just Cloud9. And then, as far as I understand it, only when Miranda stepped in on INTZ, so whatever you call it, in LATAM last year, that's the only other instance of a woman playing in T1 and Siege. Maybe there's been some in APAC or EU that I'm missing, and maybe I'm missing another one in NA or LATAM even. But as far as I understand it, this is only the third time this has happened, and again, Miranda was only a stand-in, so it's just notable. And okay, so again, I will talk more about the NAL as a whole in a future video, but for now, we have a little bit more to talk about. And yeah, here it is, G2. It's what everybody expected if you were following the leaks, what everyone was already aware of. Alamau, there was a lot of trolling in this off-season, in this preseason, and well, trolling, I guess people just trying to hide that they were going to whatever team for the sake of their team's announcement, for the sake of, I don't know, maybe just for trolling. But Alamau talked about he was taking a break, but yeah, I mean, he fooled maybe some people, but not really many people. We have Doki, Alamau, Prano, Virtue, and Citizen here, and I don't really care to go to G2's own website to look at this. I'll just tell you the names, because they did not say the names in the post here, but those are their names. And I guess left to right, it's Prano, Virtue, Alamau, Citizen, and Doki. Citizen and Doki used to play together on Na'Vi for some amount of time, and I think maybe even played on Eminem before that. Alamau coming over from LATAM. I think Thunder is also joining Na'Vi, so another Brazilian player coming over to LATAM. I think this is the first time that's happened, so 2 occurrences of it happening here. We've seen players from various regions go to other regions. Alfama went to NA, he went to APAC, and then we've seen now Brazil come to EU. I don't know that we've seen NA go to any other regions, unless you count Alfama as kind of NA because he was here for a while, but again, originally EU. So yeah, another super team for G2, but this team is actually well-rounded. They were sort of lacking aggression in the entry department. Citizen, great entry player, but not, well, it depends how you say entry. He's a good like second entry lurker kind of player, like phenomenal, maybe the best in the world, one of the best in the world. And they needed a real spearhead, and Doki should fill that role. And then Alamau is sort of like a hybrid support. I don't know what he'll be doing exactly, but Prano recently was playing actual support on Rogue, so I imagine he'll probably be playing hard breach and support on defense, but maybe not the smoke, because Alamau plays the smoke, but maybe he'll play something else. And then Virtue, some sort of flex, I suppose, somewhere in the middle. So maybe Prano support, Alamau and Virtue on flex, and then Citizen and Doki on the entry. And yeah, it looks like a super good roster. I mean, Alamau, one of the most impressive players in Brazil recently. Citizen, one of the most impressive players in the world, and I guess just even in the world, right? Citizen, one of the most impressive players in the world. Virtue hasn't been spectacular since he's been on G2. He's had his moments, but maybe this is where he'll really thrive. Prano sort of revitalized that Rogue roster, and I mean, maybe it'll fall to pieces now without him. I think those are the only other announcements we're waiting for in EU, and I'm going to show the full EU thing in a minute here. And then Doki's just been really good, if not always consistent, sometimes putting up really poor numbers, but sometimes putting out of this world numbers. And I think I have, whoops, I didn't mean to zoom in. Okay, Na'Vi. Unfortunately, unlike the G2 one, I do have to go to the website because it does not actually say the moves here, but okay, so we'll go to the website. And in this mess of text here, it says that Thunder and Kayak are replacing Doki and Save. So the full roster: Kayak, Thunder, Blur, Secretly, and Nathan. So again, another Brazilian player coming over here, the one I was referencing before, and then Kayak coming over from G2. So sort of a little switch of Doki and Kayak. And then Blur, Secretly, and Nathan are here. They were sort of before these moves, Na'Vi was sort of like middle of the road team. They did attend the Mexico Major, not doing that well. And then they went to SI, and it looked like they're going to do really poorly, and they ended up doing a little bit better than they did at the beginning, but then they still just fell short against SSG, and then were eliminated. Okay, so yeah, I guess we'll see what happens with them. I want to say the rosters may be weaker, but I don't know a lot about Thunder, so maybe he will be quite good, and maybe Kayak will also be beneficial for this roster. He might be coming off the hard support, with Secretly probably playing the hard support, and I don't know if this means that they're going to be lacking firepower having Secretly and Kayak, but maybe I'm just underestimating their gunning skills. And then if I go to the next page, it is, yeah, so here we have just, and I should have made this dark mode, but sorry guys, I forgot. Okay, and now I'm just going to go through the full rosters for EUL, so there could technically be a couple more changes, and Rogue still does have 2 empty slots to fill. And then also Vitality, this is X Vitality, they have to find an org. I'm assuming they already found an org and haven't announced it. Probably they'll have an org, but I guess I don't know that for certain. So on BDS, we have Shaiko Alems, Renshiro, Rafal, and Bride on X Vitality, Bibu, Rise, Shinka, P4, and Mowgli. On G2 is Citizen, Virtue, Prano, Doki, and Alamau. On Heroic, and this is the X Kavana roster, and Anarchic just went to coach, and Uno replaced him. So same roster basically, but under the Heroic org now. Sloth, Gorgona, Grizzly, Benjamaster, and Uno. Na'Vi has Kayak, Thunder, Secretly, Nathan, and Blur. Rogue has Cryan, Rips, and Leon Gids, as well as 2 open slots. At the moment, they're filled, right, with the transfer window closed. We just don't know who is filling those slots. And then Empire, the new Empire roster, and I guess I forgot to mention who it was in particular replacing them. I had it on the screen, but Scyther, Omission, Andreezy, Exodus, and WTG. I think Exodus and Omission coming over from Hellraisers, with Omission formerly playing on Vertice Pro, and Andreezy played on Vertice Pro for some amount of time, and I think that's where he most recently played, and then WTG also coming over from Vertice Pro. So again, they're all Russian players coming over from either of those 2 other teams. Okay. The actual Vertice Pro roster also has some new players. Pasha, Rask, Milan, FMX, and Smash by Ash. Milan, Pasha, and Rask sticking around, picking up FMX and Smash by Ash. And then Eminem, Nello, Neo, Solotov, Tyrant, and Uzis. Some people thought that some of their players might be getting poached, but I guess that isn't what happened. And then finally we have Secret, Kendrew, Gomfi, Slebin, Keenan, and Packbull. And these are the guys that just narrowly avoided relegation. Eminem is the team from Challenger League that made it in via relegation. And then everyone else was here before. So again, Heroic was in before, but it was Kavana. And also Heroic was in, but their team got relegated. So now here's the org sticking around with another org's team. And then we'll see just one more org filling the Vitality spot. And okay, yeah, that does it for this video. I suppose technically there's some coverage I didn't do here. I didn't really talk about the Vertice Pro stuff that happened a little while ago. I wasn't so much intending to talk about the EU stuff, but I mean the G2 and the Empire things were just so massive that I sort of had to talk about them. Maybe once LATAM concludes their shuffle, I'll just like go over who's on the teams now. I'm not terribly knowledgeable about their whole ecosystem, but I do intend to do at least a power ranking for NA, and then probably also a little thing to watch out for. Some sort of breakdowns, maybe go over who's probably playing what role and what I expect from teams and things like this. And then, maybe a few other things. And if you have any suggestions on things in particular you want to see, which I probably just said before and forgot, let me know. So, okay, I think that's gonna do it. Got like 10 more subs in the last day, so the numbers continue to tick up, which is quite cool. So, welcome everybody. And okay, with all of that being said, I will catch you guys in the next video.